Moving along, Administrative Committee. Number 1, recommend resolution and joint participation agreement with Florida Department of Transportation for roadside beautification project on US 98 from Andorra Street to Ortega Street intersections. We had a lengthy discussion on this on Monday. Any further comments at this time? Mr. Rob Williamson.
Mr. Chairman, just that we had some questions about if I want to. There were questions raised by Vice Chairman Lynchard primarily about there could be a difference in the maintenance agreements from the first 2 phases or previous beautification projects that were already brought online, and that they could somehow be looking for additional maintenance with this phase. And I was wondering if Hunter could speak to that.
I reviewed it, and Ms. Fitzgerald did a memorandum. I don't know. I think.
Roy, get closer to the.
Okay, I reviewed it. The joint participation agreement form is the same. The exhibit that requires the local government to maintain it permanently is the same. There were some statements in exhibits A, which was a part of the grant application that was done originally by the United Peninsula Association in the phases 1 and 2, where the first 2 agreements are a little bit different. They indicated that the merchants and the homeowners association was going to take responsibility for that maintenance. The phase 3 agreement made it clear that the maintenance was going to be assumed by Santa Rosa County. As it has actually happened, I think that the county is undertaking the maintenance of all 3 of those projects, and we've determined that TDC funding is appropriate for that purpose. So the contracts are essentially the same, but there's a little bit more clear commitment by the county that we're going to do all the maintenance on phase 3.
And I know that the District 1 Commissioner had also had questions about funding, and I think it's going to be prudent of this board as we move forward to maybe better define what is and is not a tourism corridor, not only for future maintenance, but also so we have an understanding of where we could where we're allowed to spend bed tax collections and maybe where it would not be acceptable. But this project's been well vetted. You know, we've talked about it. It's been before staff for quite some time. It's been approved by the TDC. You know, this board has talked about it, and I appreciate the support as we move forward. I mean, it's a needed improvement for the gateway to our tourism industry there, an area that as the resurfacing finishes, it definitely needs to have a sense of arrival for our returning visitors and first-time visitors to Santa Rosa County. It's good to see that this is finally going to provide something that I know the folks living in District 4 and South Santa Rosa County have been asking for a little while, and it was just been difficult to, you know, work through all the construction and bringing these projects online. So it's good to see that this improvement's finally coming. I hope that any of the questions that the board members had from Tuesday have been answered.
I believe so, but on Tuesday we also talked about there are other phases that's going to be part of this overall plan, and we did ask staff to identify those other phases and where that funding would come from as it works its way toward the Okaloosa County line. So,
yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could quickly, that was the big difference between phase 1 and phase 2. UPA had provided in the grant request or the grant submittal that actually they would be funding the maintenance of those phases with corporate sponsorships. And in phase 3, this was in the grant submittal would be funded by Santa Rosa County. I think as we look at additional phases, that language is going to be very important. And likely what we'll find is as we get farther away from the Navarre Bridge or these north-south connectors coming off the interstate, it might be a harder sell that would be funded from TDC dollars, and we may need to have corporate sponsorships clearly identified if we're going to move forward with this.
I agree, and I'm just not sure how many tourists come to Navarre by the way of Highway 98 toward Fort Walton, so I look forward to seeing that plan better identified.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner J.R. Williamson.
Commissioner Williamson, just since we're not able to talk about these things without meetings, I don't know if you've looked at the priority list for the TPO, and one of the higher priorities is a section of Highway 98 for widening, and just wanted you to be aware of that because I don't know if there's any portion of this, I don't know if it's the same portion or not, you know Highway 98 a lot better than I do, where we could do some beautification and then it have to be torn out. Just be aware of that with as we move forward, since that is your district, and you might want to look at that. I can't remember what section it is, but I'd hate for us to spend money on doing, you know, that part be done first, and then us have to come and tear it out, because I think we're just waiting for the dollars to be able to do. The PD&E's already been done, design's been done. They're just waiting on the funding mechanism for that portion of Highway 98.
That's the great thing about this project, is that this is funded from a DOT grant of $171,300. So we do front the cost, but then we're reimbursed that as long as we maintain the integrity of the plan that we put forward. Yes, the 6-laning, the first phase of 6-laning coming from Naval Live Oaks to Avalon is now going through the right-of-way purchase. That has been funded, and then construction. That'll be the first phase of 6-laning. The PD&E study for the remaining Highway 98 sections of 6-laning going all the way through to Mary Esther Cutoff has been funded in the FY16 year. That PD&E study should get started here at the end of 2015. So yeah, I am aware of that. It's a long process, though, as you know, as the incoming chairman, that we're on average 10 years from the time the PD&E starts to the time we're finished with construction. But yeah, we're aware of the widening.
Commissioner Williams also is, obviously that's why these go through the DOT, is they certainly are aware of what their construction plans are, and Ms. Minor is the consultant, and then they've been working with Mr. Furman on some of the local on-the-ground type stuff, so they're aware of that, and they time those, and they'll typically set the money aside and then hold off once the construction's done, because obviously you don't want to put down irrigation and plant material and have to tear it out. So the DOT tracks that, obviously. This is their facility.
Okay, good discussion. At this time, I'll move approval of number 1 without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Number 7, discussion of draft ordinance related to code enforcement system and procedures. Mr. Walker?
This is mine, I think, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman. I've been working with staff, with the building department, the code enforcement arms, all of our enforcement authorities in the county to try to look at our existing code enforcement system, and which utilizes the county court system, which is somewhat cumbersome. We've had good results in going through the county court system, but that's not really this is not what they do, essentially. The code enforcement ordinance that I propose uses a system of a special magistrate that is appointed by the county to handle hearings in a citation system. We've also clarified and the type of citations we issue, the amount of citations. We've looked at the citations to try to make sure that they are good enough to enforce compliance. We have looked at repeat offenders and a enhanced penalty for them, and also a subsequent offender, which is an entity that would evidence a pattern or practice of continued disregard of the Land Development Code. So this is it's a pretty substantial revision of what we've been doing, and since it just went to the board on a draft form last week with the holidays, I figured that we would give you a chance to go through it, and I think have a few folks in the audience perhaps that may want to speak to this before we go forward with having a public hearing in regard to enacting the ordinance. We'd probably schedule that at the next meeting, but I'd like to address any questions that you may have, and I would recommend that you read this and look at it fairly closely. That's the purpose for the extended review.
So today it's more of a draft, an information item for us to continue to review. You'll bring it back to us, set the public hearing, then we'll move forward.
That's correct. That's my plan.
Okay, any questions from the board? Commissioner Rob Williamson.
Just in Division 1, where it sets out the different folks who can be, I guess, enforce the ordinance, and the department heads are listed there, as well as the county administrator and the board of commissioners, and then it designates a separate mention of the Navarre Beach executive director. Could you just explain that part a little bit in layman's terms?
Well, it's taken directly from the land development regulations that are in effect at this time. So it quotes the ordinance that is in place now, and it essentially says that all of the county officers are mandated to enforce compliance with it. It also says in Section 1 that a code enforcement officer is any agent or employee of the county's duty is to ensure code compliance. And we have in the code enforcement officers appointed, and that's who's going to be on the front line in regard to enforcing it.
As this is not a total rewrite, this is an amendment of the existing ordinance. Is that? It is a substantial
rewrite of the code enforcement process that we have in place. It is not a rewrite of the land development regulations. It's based upon them.
But it's not something we would want to get a strike-through version of, to where you're comparing the two. It's new enough of a version that would not be beneficial.
Staff has had, I think, 4 to 6 meetings in regard to this, and there have been strike-throughs and additions in each of those. It's an evolving document. I can certainly send to you a chain that would show where we started. This ordinance is essentially a uniform ordinance that started out as a City of Milton ordinance. So.
I agree with the effort, especially to help with chronic offenders, but as this is my first time seeing it, and ultimately someone has got to make a decision on it, I'd love to see this is where we started, this is what we're proposing, and here are the differences. So maybe not the chain as much as, day one and where we are now. That would be very helpful to me, just so I could maybe articulate what some of the changes are going to be. I've had some folks ask me, well, what's going to be different? And to me, this is not something that's going to be penal to business owners or to folks that make a mistake one time. But I think what this does provide is something that I know in District 4 have been asking for. You have chronic offenders or folks that just factor into the price of their development, violating our code. This will maybe provide an opportunity for things to get a little bit more expensive as the penalties are enhanced, and maybe puts a little bit of teeth into our code enforcement. Thank you for all the work you've done on this.
Sure, well, I'll be happy to send that information to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.